Right, so welcome to our second day of the World Athletics Championships. I'm here with Dr. Ross Tucker, one of our leading sports scientists here in South Africa and around the world, and myself, Mike Finch, the editor of Runner's World here in South Africa. And an interesting day yesterday, obviously the first day of the World Championships. We had the 10,000 metre men's final last night. It was a bit of a running brawl of sorts. Then we had a first chance to have a look at how Usain Bolt was doing in the 100 metres. And then, of course, there was Caster Semenya. We're going to talk a little bit about her a bit later on. Obviously, the big story today is going to be Usain Bolt. But let's take a bit of a step back and look at the 10,000 metres last night. Mo Farah, probably one of the most controversial characters in the sport of athletics at the moment, but utterly dominant. Ross, your take on the race last night?
Yeah, Mike, when we spoke in the preview yesterday, the message was, well, the question was, how did the East Africans beat him? It was going to be their last shot, because after this he's going to go to the marathon and so on. And the answer to that was that they had to mess up the race, because for Farah it's 24 laps just sitting in and then one lap at the end to win it. And on the surface that's what happened last night, but when you watch that race there was so much going on, because literally from the gun you had Cheptegei, who we spoke about, going straight to the front. They opened with a 61.6 lap or something, which is absurdly fast.
Yeah.
And then it got fast and slow and fast and slow. And throughout the race, they were running consistently 65 seconds per lap. But the East Africans were surging every second or third lap, 61, 62, then back to 65, 61, 62. So it was, as far as major championships goes, the most that the East Africans have ever thrown at Farah. And still, it was nothing like enough. And it felt at one point like a bit of a procession with about 4 laps to go, 4 kilometers to go. You still had 12 guys there, and it looked like, well, we've seen this movie before, we know how it ends. But there was always some intrigue, because they'd never before gone as fast. 26:49 to win it is quick.
Yeah.
And they'd never done it in that manner.
Yeah.
And so it was certainly interesting to watch. But with 2 laps to go, when Farah went to the front, okay, he's not going there unless he's feeling really good.
Yeah.
And if he's feeling really good and he's going to the front now, it's done, you know.
Yeah.
So with 2 laps to go, we were back on the script.
Yeah.
And from 600 to go, and again, we called this in the podcast yesterday, he's at the front with 600 to go, and people want to come past him. But every time he senses a Kenyan or Ugandan on the shoulder, a little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster, until the final 100. So in the end, ticked all the boxes that he would have done the previous 5 major titles. But
I mean,
the manner was different.
In all honesty, I mean, it's probably the most physical 10,000 metres I've ever seen, for a variety of different reasons. First of all, that the Ugandan Cheptegei went out really hard. It was almost like a sprinting through that sort of area. And then there was, and then the Kenyans were trying the same sort of thing. There was a lot of bumping and barging. Then Farah himself was playing to the crowd as he was coming down that final home straight. He was kind of urging the crowd to support him and getting them excited about it. But then what he would do, he'd go to the front, sit on the front for just a few seconds and force everybody to go around him. Obviously, that wasn't just showmanship; that was also tactical.
Yeah, there was a lot going on, and probably even more that we couldn't see. I mean, they'd be talking to one another and touching one another. And you saw Cheptegei saying to the Kenyans, "Come through," and they weren't willing to help, which was weird at some points. And then, as I say, people were just throwing in surges for 100 meters, dropping 61 laps. There was pushing. Farah stepped off the track with about 350 to go.
What's the law with that? I mean, in theory, that somebody could appeal it.
In theory, so in 2016, in the men's steeplechase, a Kenyan called Ezekiel Kemboi did the same thing. As they were coming off the water jump, it was his 2nd or 3rd step after the jump, and he was maybe a little off balance, and he stepped to the inside of the track. That was on a straight, so that's even, to me, more innocuous than on a bend. Because anyway, the French appealed that, and Kemboi had come 3rd in that race, and he lost the medal because they upheld the appeal, which I thought was crazy, because he didn't gain any advantage. So I guess by the letter of the law, that could have been appealed, and then it would be upheld on the grounds that it has been before. But that would have been, in my opinion, I'm glad no one did. It would have been a bad way to lose a gold and to win a gold. And I think there was pushing going on, plus he didn't get an advantage from it. So for me, there was a lot of chatter about that, and I see it from the letter of the law, but storm in a teacup.
So don't forget, once if you're watching us live on Facebook, you can interact with us by sending us a comment onto our Facebook page and asking us questions. If you've got a comment about how we're doing as well, let us know what your thoughts are. Also, a bit later on, we'll be downloading this as a podcast. We'll put the link on our Facebook page on our website, and you can download that and listen to it when you're taking your kids to school or to rugby today if you're in South Africa. Anywhere you want to be. So it's an opportunity to kind of get some insight, not only about the events that happened last night, but also about what's going to be looking forward to tonight. So I guess the question is now, with Mo Farah having not lost to 10,000 or 5,000 in 5 years now, I think it is, since he won in 2012.
Yeah.
Is the question, is he the greatest of all time in terms of the 10,000 meters? Or is this shadow that hangs over his head around his association with the drugs scenario is still hanging over his head? I mean, what is the story? I know you've been quite outspoken about him. What are your thoughts on him? What does the evidence suggest?
If I'm as blunt as possible, I would say that there is no less trustworthy athlete in the sport at the moment, in my opinion. And I say that for a number of reasons that go back 5 years. In terms of titles, if you just put it on a page and you said, this is Mo Farah's CV, and you put that CV next to Bekele, Gebre Selassie, even Zatopek back in the day in the 50s, then for sure he's comparable and he's in that conversation. He's got more track titles than they do. Where he's lacking is on the road and cross country. He's done nothing, unlike Bekele in the country and road now, and Geb obviously a lot on the road.
But just talking 10,000 meters.
But on the track pedigree, statistically, in a measurable sense, he is, because he's won more than anyone else.
But should he not be the world record holder?
Well, that's the big on the track. That's the big thing missing from the CV is he's got an innocuous 2-mile or indoor world record here and there, but he's not gone for it ever, because he comes to these events, he wins them normally in something relatively slow, but with a super fast lap. Last night was quick; it was almost a PB. So that's telling. I mean, last night he won this thing in a tactical race in what was nearly a PB. So that tells you a little bit about his attitude towards racing for times. He's got a breadth of performances that is almost unparalleled, from a 3:28 1500 up to a 2:08 marathon. That's not been done. Geb was close and faster in the middle, but yeah, for me, again, I can watch the sport most times and set aside cynicism and skepticism. But with Farah, it's very difficult. Because this is a guy who's had 2 main coaches, and they're both under investigation. Alberto Salazar is under US anti-doping and potentially FBI investigation for doping athletes and prescribing medicines they don't need. His other coach, who he lied many times about even knowing, but has been photographed with, and he mentions in his own book, is Jama Aiden, who was arrested last year in Spain because he had a pharmacy's worth of EPO and other drugs on him, and he was providing that to athletes. So one of them's facing a Spanish police investigation, the other one's in trouble with the law in the USA, and Farah's the guy who keeps... And the problem is there's been so much dishonesty in his statements about it. I don't have TUEs for this. The leak comes out, okay, I do. I don't know Jama Aiden. All right, he wanted a selfie with me. No, it turns out... Just
explain what a TUE is.
Sorry. So therapeutic use exemption. Yeah. So one of the main allegations... Step back. One of the big trends in doping now is the medicalization of sport. So... I think as anti-doping has improved, and we've spoken about this twice now, the ability of dopers to use the classic drugs has diminished. I think they still do in certain circumstances, but they've shifted to using medical products, thyroid hormone, cortisones, and so forth. And for some of those asthma drugs, you can get a therapeutic use exemption where the authorities allow you because you have a medical condition. And so Salazar, one of the big accusations against Salazar made by many of his athletes is that he abuses that system. So people wanted to know what Farah was on, and he told them that he wasn't on certain things, and then it emerged that in fact he was. So there's a lot of dishonesty there and evasiveness, and that's not going to get you banned for doping. Make no mistake, that to me, that's not direct evidence of doping. But again, if this was a court case, and I wish it were, that stuff would be put out there, and he would look, at best, like a dishonest guy.
So it's a circumstantial evidence at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
In legal terms.
Like so circumstantial evidence, association with guys who we know are doping athletes. I mean, they're under investigation, so maybe we don't know yet, but it'll be confirmed over time. And just for me, the sum of all that evidence makes Mo Farah very difficult to believe, extremely difficult to believe.
Well, let's hope. I guess if you're an athletics lover, you want him to be a clean athlete, because you want to believe that those performances are fantastic. And really, last night was an impressive performance. Taking away all of that, he was majestic in many ways and sat at the back of that field for a long time. He obviously had utter confidence in his ability to be able to almost play with that group, which I find incredible. And you look at those, some of the class of athletes up there, he was literally playing with them at points during the race. Yeah,
when because he starts the race way back and he seems to settle in, and he came around at one point and he gestured to the crowd. And then watching this, I'm like, okay, as I've said, I don't believe in what I'm seeing from him, and so it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But you watch that and I'm thinking, this guy, to be showing that within 10 minutes of this final, he's pretty confident. He's winning this. Yeah.
Moving on, Usain Bolt, obviously, as we all know, his last World Championships didn't look that good last night. I know that if you listen to the BBC commentators, it's a very different race to the one that I saw, because they're almost making him look like he's just cruising. But he came out the blocks really badly and wasn't happy.
Super poor the first 40 meters. And I was reading afterwards, he complained about the blocks. He said they're the worst blocks he's ever used. Now, he's the only one who has. I haven't seen any of the other athletes. Although some others, Johan Blake also got a dreadful start and looked very poor. He was dragging a piano behind him yesterday. Simbine from South Africa is a sub-10 guy who's one of the medal contenders. He looked extremely poor out the blocks.
He did a 10.2, didn't he?
10.15. So he made it as the fastest loser, because he only came fourth in his heat.
I think the slowest person that went through was the 10.25, was the slowest qualifier.
About that, yeah. And so,
but only one athlete actually broke sub-10 though.
That's right.
Which is incredible.
Really,
you'd expect that.
In this round, that's typical. I had a look back at the last two big championships, and the first round, normally you're looking between 10 and 10-1. Most of the guys go. So tonight, what you want to look for in the semis is who can go to 9.9 to 9.95. And then the final, you'd hope for something in the 9.8s, I think. That would be my guess. Anyway. But so Bolt, I agree with you that. So first of all, I don't think we're getting the BBC commentary, which I'm grateful for, because from what I've seen on Twitter, it is painful. Well, it was last night, because Farah was running and Paula and the crew are just fawning over him. But the commentary that we got last night also, it's like, what race are you watching? And there were a few others like this as well. But Bolt looked poor. Once he was running, he looked like Bolt, but
he was. I mean, he's really in his face. You could see he was pushing hard, just to make up that gap at the start.
That's how bad his start was. He'd lost 2 meters to guys who he would normally be 2 ahead of. So he needs to tighten that up, because if that happens in a final, he's not coming back.
Well, I suppose the other, I guess, conspiracy theory, if you can call it that, is it not just him playing games? Is it not just him going, "Oh, I'm not feeling so good, but actually I've got plenty in the tank. I know I can get through the first round," lulling his competitors into a sort of false sense of security? And because he was very obviously disappointed at the end, shaking his head, all that sort of thing. So is that not just him going, "Oh," and people are going to think, well, maybe Bolt is vulnerable and they underestimate him in the final tonight?
Possibly, but if I was playing that game, I would want to get out at least level with everyone, and then coast it in at 90% while they're eyeballs out, and pretend that I was working hard, because you don't want to stumble and lose balance and so on, and then next thing you know, you can't come back, and it's a bit risky to concede. I'd rather so I doubt that he's playing that game.
Who did look good?
I thought Coleman looked the best, and I think it was heat 1. He was running down the bottom, so in lane 9, and he ran 10.00.
He was second fastest, I think.
and he looked like he shut it down with 30 to go. So he was a 995, I reckon, without that. And then obviously the sub 10 guy had to look reasonably good to do that.
Yeah.
But
Gatlin?
yeah, he looked fine. And again, it's so difficult to know because
those serious arms on him.
Yeah, you see those guys can run at 90% and still run 10:05. You know, they look comfortable running it, but you don't know because in the semis and the final they're turning that notch up. That dial up like 1 or 2 notches, and then you start to introduce tension. So sometimes they'll try and go faster and end up slower because of that tension. So anyway, they looked okay, but the semis will tell us tonight.
Yeah.
And so Simbine and Blake are the two who I think have got the most in their minds because they really didn't look good.
No.
And they would have been favoured to make the final. So they'll be going to that semi tonight saying like, was that just one bad race, or in Simbine's case was it one bad start, or is there something here that I'm not where it should have been? So there'll be a lot of doubt for them, but Bolt and the rest on course, but he's got work to do.
I guess for the southern hemisphere athletes like Simbine, who was absolutely unbelievable in the first half of this year. This story that we talked about the other day about having to peak twice a year, it's tough for these guys. I mean, a lot of the Australian athletes used to suffer from this, and the South African athletes have always battled with having to peak for a South African season and then suddenly having to do it again 3 or 4 months later.
It's like if you're in a time of drought and you're using water from the sort of kitchen tap and you're turning it on and you never quite know when it's going to turn it and nothing's going to come out. That's what it's like because you're depleting all the time.
Yeah.
And these guys have been depleting from March when they've been peaking for SA champs, and they've been trying to sustain that level. And at some point, you're thinking like the well is running dry. So, yeah.
Right, next thing up, Caster Semenya, first round of the 1500 metre heats yesterday, looked imperious. Second round tonight, and then the final on Monday. She's going for that double, 800, 1500 double. And the next Kelly Holmes, I think, to some extent. Is she? There's a lot of talk about it. Is she going to hurt herself too much in the 15 to be competitive in the 800? What were your thoughts on her performance yesterday? Very early days still.
Yeah. So all 3 of the big names won their heats. Debaba, Hassan, Kipyegon, looking in different ways very comfortable. So that's 3 tick marks there. Laura Muir qualified comfortably enough, so did Jenny Simpson of the US. So the big 5 are through, and then Semenya, if she wasn't in people's minds already, will be now, because she came into World Champs with a 4:16, which is pedestrian. She ran 4:02 yesterday in a slow tactical race. So now, if they weren't already, and I'm sure they were, now they're thinking, okay, there's another threat here. And we've had discussion about this on the podcast so far. People saying she's not a chance because she's just too slow. I think yesterday showed that she will be if that pace is not really aggressive and she's not dealt with in the first 2 laps. She's looming there very, very ominously. So I still wouldn't say she's the Kelly Holmes like favourite because the 3 women ahead of her in the 15 are good 800 metre runners. I was looking it up actually. You know that in the Rio 1500 final, the final 800 was done in 1:57.
Sure. Okay.
Which is
that's a competitive 800 metre time.
Yeah, because Semenya's running 1:55.
Yeah.
So the back half of a 1500 is for those 3 athletes, Kipyegon and Debaba, similar to. So it's not as though Semenya's got a massive speed, it's 800 metre advantage, but it's enough that she'll be a factor. I think she'll be a factor. If not, her presence will be a factor. So, we'll see the semis are tonight.
Yeah.
So then you start to get an idea of who can double up, and tactically the 15 is really interesting because yesterday the fields are weak enough. Top 6 qualify. You can make 1 or 2 mistakes, but as you get nearer the sort of pointy end, more difficult to make those mistakes. And it'll be interesting to see who tactically has the thing under control and how Semenya handles that, because that was an example of the commentary. Steve Ovett was commentating for us here in South Africa, And so Menu ran the first heats, and she was off at the back. And so Steve Ovett wouldn't stop about how she's obviously struggling, doesn't know how to handle herself in this race. So Menu not looking good. The very next heats, Hassan from the Netherlands did the same thing, but she's the world number 1 this year, and Ovett was going on about how tactically smart she was being. It's like, come on, Steve.
Yeah.
Smart. Why is that?
I suppose we're all biased in a way.
Yeah, I guess.
we talk about Kester a lot, and we talk about Wade van Niekerk a lot. But
but anyway, so Kester to me looked tactically savvy.
Yeah.
Just stay back.
Yeah, stay out of trouble.
Get to the front with 500 to go, or near the front with 500 to go. Make sure you're there. You know that in the last, Semenya's last lap was the quickest of that race, and she'll make the final. Yeah. And then Monday night will be fascinating. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So a couple of other finals on tonight. We've got the men's 400 meters. Obviously Wade van Niekerk, the Olympic champion, the world record holder, and the world champion, defending world champion, in there. I guess for him, the pressure is on. He's expected to win, and there's a lot of obviously media here in South Africa about him. But I guess that chances of him breaking a world record again, pretty slim.
Yeah, he hasn't shown anything on the circuit to suggest he's in that kind of shape. But then he didn't last year. He was running high 43 going into the Olympics, and then dropped at 43.03. So he hasn't shown that again, other than to run quicker over 200 than he ever has. So he's obviously got something there. But what I wonder about him, is whether the prospect of doing the double has changed his training a little bit, because he would have had to focus a bit more on the 200. And when you lean more towards the 200 side of things, do you compromise the 400 a little bit? And so he might find that he's faster over 2, but he can't quite spin that into a good 4. And then the other thing is, as we said, unless he's got guys with him at 50, 60 to go. Because in Rio, as we said, he ran the first 300 not knowing where anyone was. Yeah. So that was enough incentive to go
on that outside lane. Yeah.
And then coming into the home straight, he had at least Merritt and James had followed him. And in the end paid massively because they exploded. And he was able to, now it's the last 50 of the Olympics, the first Olympics, you're not going to back off. So will that scenario unfold again? I doubt it. I think he'll be more measured, and if he finds himself in lane 4 or 5 and his rivals are in 3, 6 and 5 or whatever, he's watching them, he'll measure it, and so I don't think so.
Yeah. Essentially he wants to do the double rather than break any records. That's really would be the
focus. What's in his mind? Does he want the world record? And is he gonna do that? Because when he won the world title in 2015, remember he collapsed on the track and he had to go after, I don't know whether that's psychological or emotional or physical, but he spoke. I remember seeing him speak afterwards that happens to him a lot. Does he want to do that and then get to come back the next day for I don't know.
What were the theories around that? I mean, it was quite an amazing incident that, you expected him to be celebrating and he really just did fell out. What was the science saying? What
I don't know.
Just fate, like exhaustion?
No, the science is guessing. Really? Remember Kathy Freeman did a similar thing in Sydney, but I think that was just, she lit the flame, and then she has to run in that Olympics. That's pressure. Yeah. So I think when Kathy Freeman won that title, that was just emotional. I don't know, catastrophe. She didn't know what to do with herself. Maybe Wade's the same. I don't know.
He always seems so cool, Wade van Niekerk. There, nothing seems to faze him at all. I mean, he's got an incredible BMT at the end of the day, doesn't he? I mean, he doesn't seem to struggle with nerves, and really just his religion. His religious beliefs are very strong. He often says that's what it kind of gets him through these very tough, stressful times.
Yeah, I've seen that. There was an article in the Guardian 2 days ago about him, talking about why he won't be the next Usain Bolt from a personality point of view because of how different they are. Yeah. And it mentioned that. So that's worth people having a look at if you want to get to understand a little bit about his psyche compared to Bolt's. It's because they couldn't be more different.
He's got a better haircut than Bolt, if you like that style.
Well, if you, yeah.
Bolt was looking a bit old last night, even though he's only 31 years of age. You know, he's receding hairline.
Yeah.
You can't really call him an old man at 31, but he certainly doesn't look like the sprightly youngster that
I'd love to
appeared
see
6 years ago.
I'd love to see Bolt when he's 58 or something, you know.
Yeah.
Like what will he look like?
Probably be in movies.
Yeah, making guest appearances in the Hangover 16 or something.
Along with
like
Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Right, final question. Women's 10,000 metres stone. That's the final.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Who we're looking at?
So that was a world record in Rio.
Mm-hmm.
Almaz
That was the
Ayana.
first event, I remember, on the track.
Yeah, they
and field.
opened that up in the afternoon.
I missed that.
And it was nuts. That was a, you know, we speak about like watching the men's 10 and Farah with like no confidence in what's happening. That was the women's 10 in Rio was insane because they went through halfway in like 14:46, which is a top women's 5,000 meter time, and then Ayana got faster. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it's unlikely you'll see a repeat, even though most of the athletes are back.
Mm-hmm.
Ayana's been patchy to non-existent this year. She was injured for early part of the year, and then she was meant to run in 2 Diamond League events and pulled out of them at the last moment. So no one knows exactly what kind of condition she's in. So if she shows up and runs anything like a world record, I'm calling shenanigans on tomorrow morning's podcast. We'll have to talk about doping again. So that's she's one to watch. And then Tirunesh Dubaba is in the race, and she came 3rd, I think, in Rio. In the fastest time she's ever run, but she was well beaten because Ayana was just so far ahead of everyone. And then Dubaba then went to the marathon and did a really good London performance. Didn't win it, but was a 2:17 something, which is quick. So she's got form. She's done a couple of really good half marathons. So she comes into the race as probably the favourite. But then there are 3 Kenyans who are really good. You've got world cross country champion from this year and from 2015 is a separate woman, so that's 2 of them. And then the names escape me now. It's not Tirop. It's Alice Aprot is the woman who led them through 5 in Rio. And so those 3 Kenyans. Remember, Kenya went in world cross country this year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
And 3 of them are in this race.
Dominant.
That's slightly blanketing the finish. So the 3 Kenyans will not be as easy to deal with as maybe they were in the men's. Well, they weren't easy, but so it's the 2 Ethiopians against the 3 Kenyans, and then maybe an American can be in the mix with a lap or 2 to go. It depends how aggressive the Africans wish to be. So that should be a very interesting race.
Yeah.
If I were betting, I'd go Dibaba, and then a Kenyan, and then perhaps Ayana. So
it's always great to see the Ethiopians and Kenyans racing each other because there is a lot
fierce.
There is a lot of pride in both those nations, and they really do try and almost work as a team against each other. You know?
Yeah, they are, and so that'll be interesting to see tonight. You know, so
right. So let's put it out there as our final sort of quote for today. Is Bolt going to win tonight?
Oh,
yes, no, maybe.
I wish we could do a podcast between the semi and the final because then you'd have an idea. Because if Bolt can run the semi-final with a decent start and his usual later acceleration, and he runs it in 9.96, 9.97, coasting the last 20, then you're saying, okay, this guy's going to win this thing. But I want to see Bolt again because he hasn't done enough to convince me yet. So
I mean, I agree with you. There is doubt as to whether Bolt can win tonight. It almost sounds like heresy when you talk about Bolt not winning.
So a couple of interesting things is Gatlin won his heat and got booed. If he wins the final, that stadium is going to boo with the same intensity that they cheered last night. You know, which is crazy because Gatlin served the bands and so on. So that's qualitatively and quantitatively a bit different to the others, but there's no reason, in my opinion, there's no reason to doubt Gatlin any more than many of the other guys who could win this. So if Gatlin wins, it's going to be that's going to be spicy. But I mean, there are 5 or 6 guys who could win it. It's the most open 100 final that we've seen since 2008. You know, so that's I'll say Bolt because history says that, but. I'm not convinced at all. And then, we'll
I think Bolt too, but by just a shade. it's going to be tenths of a second, and close, and probably one of the slowest times for a world championship win. It's not going to be fast at all, I don't think. Certainly on
for me,
current form of everybody.
987 wins it.
Okay, so 987, Bolt by just a whisker.
Whoever by a whisker.
By the length
Bolt
of his beard.
Or Gatlin or someone. yeah. And so it'll be interesting because it's going to be close enough that tension makes the difference. In 2015, Gatlin looked dominant the whole year. And then suddenly found himself in the World Championship final with Bolt coming up on him. And he got tight. I mean, you could see in his face and his neck, he just tied up. And so, who handles that? That's probably going to make the difference. Bolt, and see, the other thing is, Bolt's not accustomed to being behind with 20 to go. 50, yes, but if Bolt's not quite at the level he's been at, then he will be chasing all the way to 80. And then how does he handle that? So, I think tension makes the difference. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a false start in the final because it's so close. And so they know, so we saw, by the way, a false start from a South African yesterday. The only one that I saw. And so the reaction time they allow is 0.1. In the past, most guys get off in 0.13, so that's 300ths of a second. And Bolt 0.14.
And that's used special sensors on the blocks themselves. Right. So there's not a start, somebody physically looking and saying somebody false started. It's all electronic. So you don't even have to leave the blocks because once you're in your get set position, if you just push back with your legs without necessarily moving, you'll trigger the sensor. And so then it registers, and if your reaction is quicker than 0.1, you're out. And when you think about it, if you can go 0.13 as opposed to 0.15, that's 200ths of a second. That's probably the winning margin. So, so I wouldn't be surprised to see someone go. Not one of the favourites maybe, but someone like Matey or Uja or one of the guys who could medal but needs to be spectacular. I would look for that. Last event tonight, that is going to be, obviously they want to make sure that they can celebrate properly afterwards with whoever wins. And it'll be quite a late night for us. Call it 11 tonight, I think, the final in South Africa, but call it to 10 in the UK. So, Ross, thanks very much for your time today. We look forward to a very exciting day of athletics, of the World Athletics Championships. Obviously, the big story will be Usain Bolt today. And don't forget women's 10,000 metres. We'll look forward to being with you tomorrow for our third podcast. If you want to download the podcast a bit later, the link will be on our Facebook page, which you can then download and listen to in the car. You don't have to watch us. You can actually just listen to us. And keep track and let us know what you think. Put some comments on our Facebook page if you want to ask us any questions. But for now, from Ross and I, we'll see you tomorrow.
Cool, thanks. Cool, that was fun.